If your 2019 or newer Silverado 1500 is really doing a nosedive on the front end and you want the slightest of lifts to level that stance, this ReadyLift 1.5-inch front leveling kit is a great option to consider. This spacer lift is a very easy and moderate way to get some of that rake out of your truck stance, whether you don't like the factory rake and want your truck to sit a little bit more level, or you've added some weight to the front end like a bumper or a winch that's pulling it down at that extra little bit. This is a bolt-on solution that won't break the bank in order to get your truck back into good standing, and is even beneficial for some better function like fitting a larger tire and getting some better ground clearance, making for the best of both worlds. Now, I do want to note that this kit does not fit the Trail Boss or the ZR2 model, so just keep that in mind while checking this kit out. These spacers help both functionally and aesthetically, even though they don't really look like much on the table here. Now, mounted to the front struts, this lifts the front of the truck 1.5 inches, helping out with that ground clearance, as I mentioned, clearing up to a 33-inch tire in the wheel well and creating some more room in the wheel well for better suspension travel. They also raise the nose of the truck, evening out the stance for that more leveled appearance that I mentioned, but don't go overboard into an all-out squat if you know you want to keep it pretty mild and keep a tiny bit of rake for towing of any kind or other purposes like hauling. Now, the best feature of this, in my opinion, is the ride that it maintains, thanks to adding a small spacer and not removing the strut or springs or any other suspension components. This allows for a factory style ride while getting the benefit of that added height. Now, these are super simple. They're made of a 1-inch thick machined billet aluminum construction, being rust resistant for solid support over time. Now, if you noticed, these do not measure out true to 1.5 inches, and all independent front suspension spacers are like that, simply because the 1 inch of height here in this spacer, in addition to the spring compression and the suspension geometry, all work together to create that 1.5 inch lift in the front. Now, aside from the spacers, this also comes with the hardware in order to install them and consists of a modification-free install, being completely bolt-on. Now, this here is one of the most affordable solutions to lifting and leveling your truck, coming in at about $200. Now, there are many solutions to leveling your truck, but this keeps it very mild with the lift height if you know you want a small change that is going to make a difference without going overboard, and it keeps it to just spacers if you either don't want to invest in a more in-depth suspension or are happy with the suspension components that you're currently working with. Now, in my opinion, if you're looking for one of the easiest and most affordable ways to raise the nose of your truck, this is a great option to consider. Now, install is bolt-on, as I mentioned, but it still does require a decent amount of work to get it installed. So this gets a 2 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, and I would say all said and done, with the right tools, right setup, it should take you about 3 hours or so to get this fully installed. I also do highly recommend an alignment after the install for the best performance and tire wear out of your truck. However, at this point, I'm going to hand you over to one of our installers who is going to show you a detailed breakdown on how this is installed on your truck, whether you're tackling this job yourself or you're just curious about how this bolts up. So that is going to wrap it up for what I have to say. Let's go ahead and get to the install.
For this install, you need a 3/8 impact and ratchet, a hammer, a 1/4 inch ratchet, a 21, 15, 10, and 9mm socket, an 18 and 14mm wrench, and a pry bar. All right, today we're going to be installing a lift kit on our Silverado. First, we're going to watch a quick video how to uninstall the front strut, and then we'll come back here to install the new stuff.
All right, first step here, once you get your wheels out of the way and your vehicle supported up in the air, we're going to start removing our ABS line bracket. There's one here on the knuckle and one on the upper control arm. Grab a 10mm socket and get those off. Now, what I like to do is once you pop that off, I like to just put the bolt back on just so we don't lose it. Just a couple of threads, and then do the one at the top. Next up, we're going to remove our sway bar end link. Now, this is a pretty difficult one. You want to have a couple of specialty tools here. Not necessarily specialty tools, but specific tools. What you want to use is an 18mm wrench. Put that on the nut here on the back first. Then you're going to grab a 1/4 inch ratchet and a 9mm deep socket and hold that stud on the back end. And you're going to ratchet this guy off like this instead of ratcheting the nut, just because it's a really tight space. So using the 9mm on the stud itself, you can start to loosen it all the way up and remove it. All right, once you have that nut backed all the way off, pull the end link out of the sway bar, and then I'm just gonna put the nut back on the stud. Next, we're gonna tackle the upper control arm to the knuckle here by removing the 18mm nut. I'm gonna use an 18 ratcheting wrench for this. Now, if it gets to the point where the entire stud is spinning, you can put this guy in there, follow it up with the appropriate size Allen key, and hold that stud steady. All right, making life easier here because this is starting to get stuck, we're gonna switch over to a T40 Torx socket, and using my ratchet, we're gonna hold that stud steady and ratchet this guy the rest of the way off. There you go. And what I like to do is just take the nut, put it right back on the stud. Next up, switch over to a 21 deep socket and get the tie rod end off. All right, we may need to grab a hammer to knock this guy loose. Once you have that knocked loose, let's pull that guy out. And just like the other ones, I'm gonna put this nut back on. Next up, switch over to a 15 deep socket. We're gonna get the 2 bolts holding the bottom of the strut to the lower control arm off. All right, next up, grab a 14mm ratcheting wrench. We're gonna remove the top 3 nuts holding on the strut here. That's gonna be the last step before the strut comes out. There are 2 right here in the front you can easily see, and 1 deeper in the back, which is difficult to see, but you're just gonna hit these 2 and then repeat for the 1 in the back. Once you break it loose, you can usually get it off by hand. Okay, repeat that for the 1 in the back. All right, from there, pull this guy down and set it aside.
All right, so now that we have our strut out, this is very simple. This simply just slides over the factory studs, and now we can reinstall our strut into our truck. Just gonna line everything up and get that in place. All right, so now we're gonna loosely install our hardware for the bottom of our strut. Now you would have your bolts that go up and go into the factory nut clip that's on the top. We don't have that anymore, so ours is nut and bolted, but you would just do the same thing. We're just gonna get our bolts started on both sides. Need to just give a little tap with the hammer. We can go ahead and get our 15mm nuts threaded on the bottom. All right, we'll come back and tighten them later. So now we're gonna get our supplied nuts and thread them onto our top bolts. You might just need to lift up the lower control arm a little bit so you can get some threads exposed. We'll get all 3 of these threaded on, and we'll grab our 14mm ratcheting wrench and tighten them down. Tighten this one down the back, it'll bring up the other 2. So we got all 3 of our nuts on. Let's go ahead and tighten them down with our 14mm ratcheting wrench. So now we're gonna grab our knuckle and upper control arm and get that back together. Now if you need to, just to make it a little bit easier, I like to grab a pry bar and just pull down and get everything lined up. All right, now we have our pry bar, pulling that down, just get the tension on it, and we'll thread our nut on. We'll grab our 18mm ratcheting wrench and go ahead and tighten that down. Now sometimes this does start spinning. If you need to, you just put your pry bar on there again, pull tension down on it, and it should stop it from spinning. Or you can get your T40 socket and hold the center. So now we're just gonna get our brackets back in place for our lines. So we have one here, we'll thread our 10mm bolt back in, and then our one up top. And then we'll grab our ratchet with our 10mm socket and tighten those 2 down. now we're gonna re-secure our sway bar link. Sometimes it's just a little bit easier. Get your pry bar, pull the sway bar down a little bit just to get that lined up. We'll thread our nut on. We'll go ahead and grab our 18mm wrench and our 1/4" ratchet with our 9mm socket. Go ahead and tighten that down. Now we're going to tighten our lower strut bolts. Now you would have your 15mm bolt. We have a bolt with a 17mm head, so we just have a wrench holding the top, but a 15mm nut. Last thing we have to do on this side is re-secure our tie rod. So we're going to put that back in our knuckle. Spread on our nut, and then grab our impact and 21mm deep socket, tighten that down. All right, now once you have this side all put back together, you can go ahead and repeat those same steps for the other side of the truck. And that wraps up our install of our ReadyLift 1.5" front leveling kit for our 2019 and newer Silverado 1500, excluding the Trail Boss and ZR2. And remember, for everything Silverado, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.